Today in the EU, will the European Commission let AI providers write their own rules?
And we often feel that technology just happens to us, that we have no control over it. But technology doesn't create itself.
The rise of the machine.
In the field of artificial intelligence, there's breakthroughs happening all the time. Indeed, breakthroughs are constantly coming at us faster and faster. The pace of our world is changing.
NGOs fear the EU is taking a step back in the demanding fight to regulate AI. Reports suggest the European Commission plans to choose a consulting firm to draft codes of practice for providers of AI models like ChatGPT. What is at stake and what could be the consequences of this decision? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU.
We believe in iterative deployment, so we put this technology out into the world along the way so people get used to it, so we have time as a society, our institutions have time to have these discussions, figure out how to regulate this.
The words of OpenAI CEO Sam Altman speaking at the Davos Economic Forum this year really show how time is relative to your frame of reference. On one side, in Palo Alto, OpenAI says it's pacing its technology releases. On the other, in Brussels, the European Commission is rushing to draft a code of practice to regulate the activities of OpenAI and other companies. And we all know haste is a bad advisor. To discuss how the EU regulatory machine is facing the challenge of AI, I'm joined in the studio by tech reporter Eliza Gkritsi. So first, to understand what is going on, we must go back to the approval of the AI Act and the creation of the AI European Office, the institution at the center of our episode today. What is the AI Office in charge of?
So to put it shortly, the AI Office's aim is to facilitate the uniform application of the AI Act across member states. A lot of the responsibility of actually making the AI Act work in practice falls upon national authorities, and so you need some kind of entity to make sure that this is happening uniformly across the European Union. And they also have work to do in creating certain, let's say, supporting documents, things like delegated acts, implementing acts, to actually bring the AI Act to life and make it something that you can really comply with very specific guidance.
And so at this very moment, the AI Office is busy drafting a code of practice for general purpose AI models. What companies are we referring to when we talk about GPAI?
General purpose AI is, in a sense, in my view, the AI that most people really care about. It's the AI that shook the world. It's things like ChatGPT or Midjourney that are trained on very large amounts of data, and they can perform a lot of different tasks. And that's why it's called general purpose AI.
Your reporting has focused on the latest developments around how to regulate the output of these companies. How does the Commission plan to go about it?
So based on our reporting, the codes of practice, the actual drafting will be run by a consulting firm. We don't know which one it will be yet. The main people taking part in that process will be the providers of general purpose AI. So companies like, and I'm guessing here, OpenAI, Microsoft, maybe Google, and so on.
But wouldn't that mean general purpose AI companies writing their own rules about the technology they're producing?
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. I think the argument for that is not completely invalid, to be fair, in that they really do have a good understanding of how the technology works. And they tend to also have a lot of resources and smart people working for them, so you can make the process go pretty quickly. The argument against that is, should you be allowed to write your own rules?
Exactly. Wouldn't there be a conflict of interest for the consulting firm in charge of writing the code of practice?
So this is something that we've heard and has been reported. And yes, there could be a conflict of interest. We don't really know which the consulting firm will be, but it is possible that in a small town like Brussels, they might also be working for the companies too.
Based on your reporting, civil society is overall worried about this decision. Why are they concerned, and has this happened before?
So it has kind of happened before. There was, in a sense, this happens with the negotiations of a lot of acts in technology, in that companies are often heard more than civil society. This was particularly a debate around the AI Act itself. More concretely, with a code of practice, there was a code on disinformation, I believe, drafted in 2020, which originally was mainly drafted by the companies, like the platforms where disinformation spreads. And later, this was changed to include more civil society, probably for the better. And there's also some talk about this code of practice now becoming a full-blown legal instrument under the Digital Services Act.
Have there been any other instances where the AI office workings were proved to lack transparency?
Proved is a tough word, but
Well, allegedly then.
allegedly, there's definitely been some complaints about this thing in particular. There were some members of the European Parliament that sent some questions to the Commission about how they were staffing the AI office, about the appointment of directors and so on. To my knowledge, the Commission still hasn't responded. I think that was in April, so that's quite a long time. Usually it takes them less time to respond.
Yeah, that's about 3 months, right?
It is, yeah. At the same time, I will say that the Commission does have a lot to do with regards to the AI Act, and they don't have so many people. So they do have to act really quickly. And when you have to act really quickly, listening to what everyone around you says, and there's a large ecosystem that could have an opinion on all the AI Act things, whilst also letting everyone know what it is exactly you're doing, will take up a lot of time.
Right. That's definitely a challenge. But let's say that the commission does have the time to listen to what stakeholders outside of the industry are saying and comes up eventually with a robust code of practice. What would this include? Because I think it's important to understand what is at stake when we talk about the drafting of this code of practice.
Honestly, I'm not entirely sure like what the specific debates around that are, because I don't think anyone actually is at the moment. But I would say things like maybe risk assessment itself and how to evaluate the risks and therefore the obligations that an AI provider has to follow. That's a really important thing. Like we have to make sure that we hear everyone or everyone with expertise as to what these risks might be, and have a balanced opinion, because you don't want a situation where companies tell you, oh, this is not risky at all, actually. And we are trying really hard to make it not risky already. But in practice, we see that when things are rolled out, there's a lot of risks that maybe companies didn't think about.
So risk assessment would be the main point.
I would say that's my main point. I don't know what everyone else's main point is, but these things are usually quite long documents and they hinge on a lot of details maybe. So it's hard to predict. And I also don't want to make it sound like companies really don't want to be regulated.
Right.
Even if everybody has good intentions, it's possible that one group of stakeholders hasn't fully considered everything, and sometimes you need someone else to help you think outside of your own box.
Is there anything civil society is specifically asking for? That's something that we were discussing yesterday. I don't know if you had the time in the end to reach out.
They did make a presentation to the commission, I think, to sort of showcase their expertise. That was in late April. So I think the commission knows, basically.
Because the industry is going at breakneck speed, as Margaret Vestager put it, how do you foresee the situation developing?
Well, this to me is what's really crazy about this, because the AI Act was indeed built with a certain amount of flexibility, understanding that technology changes much more quickly than things like codes of practice or standards do. So I just don't necessarily know how they're going to keep up. Even if these codes of practice come out next year, they might not be relevant after they come out or right before, just because the regulatory machine and the technologists are working at very different speeds. So we could be in a situation where one specific thing I reported on based on a conversation I had with one of the rapporteurs of the AI Act is the very idea of large language models in the AI Act is premised on a lot of data being used. But it could be that in 6 months, we just have a technology that doesn't need that much data to make really, really smart AI.
Okay.
So then you kind of have to go back to the drawing board.
And so, yes, if this was the case, would the codes of practice be updated and would they be constantly updated? How does that work? Is there a provision in the AI Act for this?
Yeah, in general, in the AI Act, everything is like open to updates. Even things like the prohibitions, because there's specific prohibitions on things you can't do with AI. Even those are up to be reviewed. But I think a lot of these are reviews that are to take place within a year of having these codes of practice, right? Or 2 years after. And then you could be triggering another review in advance of that, but will you? And how much work is that? Like, this to me just sounds like for this regulation to actually keep up with the technology, it's a pretty insane task.
Thank you, Eliza.
Thank you so much, Giada.
I'm Giada Santana, and this was Euractivist Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite streaming platform. It will really help us spread the word about our work. This episode was produced by Miriam Sanz de Tejada, Nicoletta Yonta, and me. Additional reporting by Nathan Kenes and Paul Mesed. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.